Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here for a very special roundtable tonight with three amazing people. First, I want to introduce Dr. Christiane Hinz, who is the Associate Professor of History at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. She does an amazing world history course that is both a game and an intensive study of history and a set of games. She is really awesome. Second, I would like to introduce Sebastian Bay, adjunct professor at Georgetown University's Center for Security Studies. So if you want a hardcore wargamer who is also a poli-sci expert, Sebastian Bay may be your person. And we have Harold Buchanan. He designs games. He teaches people stuff about money. Now, Harold is the designer of Liberty or Death, an American history-themed coin game, as well as a couple of other games that are set in history. And I am a Latin teacher who makes dorky YouTube videos. So here we are, but we are united by a common project. Harold, do you want to introduce the project since you're one of the founders of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Zenobia Award, we're all on the board of the Zenobia Award, and it comes out of a series of discussions that we had in the hobby about the rate of change inside the historical board game community versus the rate of change in the world, and the implications of that rate of change, right? That if possible to get the community to change, to facilitate some different faces in game design, in playing games, in reviewing games, and doing everything in the historical space, we might get some interesting output from that community. We might see some games on topics that aren't so Anglo-European centric and different perspectives on that history. So that was the discussions originally. A lot of those between Volko and I and our network of friends, and that's how we've all met is through that networking process. And Volko and I, of course, we're both freelance freelance designers. And so, we have great access. We have access to great mentors and advisors, and we can play that role ourselves given our experience. And we decided that that's really what we have to give. And if we want to facilitate change and advancement within our community, that one way to do that would be for us to get together with a bunch of like-minded individuals, form a diverse group as best we can in this not very diverse hobby, and work to advance the ball together by creating an award that pulls some of these diverse communities into the hobby in a way where we can not just provide an award, actually that's almost secondary, but primarily provide mentorship and access and facilitation in a way that, Liz, as you and I were talking about earlier, the real measure of success here is going to be the output, right? It's going to be, can we find some really interesting people to create really interesting games coming out of this process? And that's where we started. We're super early in the process. Just a few days ago, we rolled out the website and a series of social media communications. And I think the response has been outstanding. We've received a lot of really positive feedback, and we're excited about that, at least I am. And we've also received a few bits of advice, which is great as well. And we're engaging that advice. And I just couldn't be more excited in the response we received over the last couple of days.
All right. So Christiane, Sebastian, how did we loop y'all into this?
So I'll let Christiane go first.
I got an email. It was random. I had never met them before, and I'm not entirely sure. I didn't think to ask. I'm not even sure how my name got in their mouths, but they sent me a draft of their proposal saying, does this look like something that actually would have a place? Is this something that could be of use? How is this niche too small to try to to attract applicants? And I gave it a gander and was really impressed that it wasn't just to give someone an award, but it built an opportunity to mentor, educate, make connections and contacts for many applicants, not just for the winner, right? And that people would have then developed a game from a concept to a much more clearly articulated object that then they could, whether or not they won the award is not the point. They could take that piece of work, that hard piece of thinking, and take it wherever they might want to, right? And you know, the question was how to market, you know, how to place, how to advertise this to whom, and how to find this very granular niche. As a historian, as a gamer, as a game designer, as a gamification educator, you know, I couldn't think of any reason not to say, look, I don't know the answers to everything, but if you build it, someone's going to respond, because I know that there are game designers out there who are thinking about history. I know that there are game designers who are frustrated about not knowing where to go with their ideas, or if their ideas have value or merit, or right. So there was a need, even if I couldn't put my finger on where the need was. And that inspired me. Like, this is a perfect time to do this. And I was very impressed by the clarity of their articulation of their ideas. So it wasn't just foggy. I wonder if they had ideas and a plan. And so I was on board with that.
All right, Sebastian.
So I know Volko first because he lives in Northern Virginia with me, where I teach at Georgetown in DC. And I reached out to him early on when I was teaching at Georgetown. I was like, hey, like, your games are so influential. Like, would you like to be involved with what I'm doing at Georgetown? And I remember the first time we talked, and he's like, hey, this is pre-COVID. He's like, come over. And he literally, I walked away from his house after we talked and we chatted. But more than anything, he gave me every game he ever designed in like 2 boxes, and I walked away. And because he was like, hey, maybe you guys can use these. And those were like the first games donated to the Georgetown Wargaming Society. So that's how I know Volko. And then I know Harold through Volko. And when they first came to me, they're like, hey, we have this idea we want to talk to you about. I was like, yeah, sure. Let's pop on Zoom. And then we sort of just brainstormed it out. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I was like, you guys should definitely do this, because, having been teaching, war game design at Georgetown for this, short while, I can see that there's so much potential, and there's so many young designers and brilliant young, eager minds that are willing to do things. Like, you see this sort of arc with my students where they go from like super eager because they're excited about the class and class description, and then they fall off this cliff around week 2 when they realize how hard this class is going to be. Right. So they're like, oh my God, this is going to be awesome. And then they're like, oh crap, like this is really going to be hard, right? And then I know who didn't read the syllabus because it's covered in warnings, right? Right? And then there's these moments they are slugging through the syllabus and the design process, and they're really deep into their research and stuff. And they think of these really clever notions. I was like, wow, that's really clever. Or they're like, oh, we looked at this game, whether it be a distant plane or, Combat Commander or whatever, right? Or they'll just say, oh, we stole this from Settlers, right? And we were adapting it to our needs, right? And I think that's a really powerful thing, because, the game field is, aging and gray, right? And we need new voices, but also diverse voices. And, my class, has been fortunate enough to have a great, parity of voices in it, and has produced better games for it, honestly. So when Harold and Volko came to me with this idea, I was like, absolutely, I'm jumping on. I will make all my students, apply that can, And the whole point is to give them, like Christiane said, like the process itself will be meaningful, will be a value added, right? And those who win the award in the end will be even more so, right? Because they'll go through an even more vigorous process with us and the judges, and they will come out, with essentially a stamp of approval of saying all these amazing people who work in this industry think you're worth coming out this end, right? And making these connections, and it'll be, I'm sure it'll be life changing in many ways.
Awesome. So as we've pushed our information out onto the internet, we have received all sorts of questions and comments, and I think it's always good to talk about what's going on. One of the main things that I've personally seen a lot online is, what do you think that an award like this is actually going to do? What's the point of doing it? You know, just why bother? So even though we've all kind of touched on that, I think we should make a point to really cut to that chase.
So I will jump in because I am probably one of the youngest designers on the board. And I say that, you know, as sort of as a badge of honor in the sense that I got here with the help of so many great mentors, both in the professional national security realm where I do most of my gaming, right? And in the hobby world, like Voco and Harold and all these guys, right? And then in the professional realm, like Dr. Yuna Wong, who's over at IDA, who does great work, and Ed McGrady, who was a longtime at CNA. And I say this because those connections and those relationships were powerful, right? And I will say 100% I wouldn't be where I am today without, you know, I mean, a litany of folks who helped me and opened doors and supported my efforts or given me advice, right? I remember when I first started teaching, I was like, I have no idea what to do, right? Like, I was like, how do I write a syllabus, right? So I went to people I knew who taught design, who've been around the field for a long time. And those mentorships and those relationships were powerful, and they opened doors, and they're like, hey, let me introduce you to XYZ, right? Like Voco introduced me to Harold, right? And this is why I'm part of this initiative. And I think that's one of the powerful elements of this award process, right? Is the fact that if applicant can come and be like, and have their game judged by, you know what I mean, a panel of designers and thinkers in our field, in our industry, I think it would be amazing. They will, even if they don't progress, they will meet those people, make those connections, and you know what I mean, show them what they can do, and hopefully they'll come back and you know what I mean, and do it again, right? The notion is supposed to be iterative, right? It's the notion that they like game design, right? Is that you make some tweaks, you do a prototype, and maybe it works. Maybe you got the 80% solution, maybe you got the 60% solution, but every step makes you better, right? And I think that's what we're trying to do with these underrepresented voices, right? Is to give them a pathway to find those steps forward, right?
I'm not sure how to answer this question because it seems self-evident to me as an African-American woman who has been gaming since she was in high school and has gone to conventions and, presented at Indiecade and, taught gamification in various contexts. It's not a diverse space. And that explains a lot of the lack of dynamism, in my opinion, in the historical, in the history game genre. And it's kind of circular. So the lack of diversity in the history game genre means that it's less appealing. It's lacking some appeal to people whose interest in history is placed elsewhere, situated elsewhere. So, I want to make a space that's comfortable for me, right? I want to make a space where, I don't feel like I'm the one African-American game designer that's the one off that everybody calls when they want to know about diversity, right? I want to not be that person. And I'm aware that there are, many of us working either in isolation, the way I did, except for my very small cohort of, gaming friends, but working very much in isolation as a game designer for teaching. And I'm aware of people who, experience the larger gaming community in a painful way or as in an unwelcoming way. And in this particular moment, in this particular historical moment where, the United States is not just the United States, but we're trying to wake from our amnesia, our historical amnesia, and the wound that's underneath our historical amnesia. Like, now's the time to do this business. right? Whatever field we happen to be in, whatever our small world, this is a place where we can do anti-racism. This is where we can do it, right? And so it's an activism on my part. And so it seems self-evident to me that it may not be that evident to people who haven't experienced the discomfort of being a minority or a marginalized person in a very white majority, somewhat, I don't know, conservative. I'm not sure if that's true, but people who've not thought a whole lot about these matters. People aren't fully woke yet, so to speak. So, I mean, it just seems self-evident to me because I'm in this position of being the person who's uncomfortable all the time. Right. And I didn't have connections, right? I just had to work by myself, right? And that's no space for creativity there alone. There's no space for creativity.
It's interesting, as we went through this process of networking, right? I mean, I think Volko and I, when we thought about this, we said we just have to go out and gather feedback and talk to smart people and see how we can figure out what and how to do this. And in so many places we found nascent demand for, maybe it's supply, right? It's game designer brain power that exists that has never found its way to the top. And I think just about everybody we spoke to knows people that have ideas that should be cultivated and need to be cultivated. For me, as a game designer, I networked my way to it. I fought through it. I introduced myself. I forced myself into these machines, but I looked like everybody else. I spoke the same language. I knew the secret handshakes, right? It was just very easy for me in that regard. Now, I know that it's not true for all white males that that's easy, but I also know that if you're not a white male, for really no evil intended, right, by the establishment, in my opinion, right? Because I think these are all great people that I work around today. It's really hard to work your way into this process. I found mentors, I found advisors, I found people that would help me collaborate, that were all wonderful, but it would be much harder to get into that system if you had a great game idea, but you just didn't know the secret handshakes, right? Or you didn't speak the same language. So I'm excited about this for that reason. And once again, through all of this networking that we did early on and talking to the board and then another 100 people beyond that, there's so much nascent supply of game ideas and concepts and people that are excited about them, that I think we're going to see, just an explosion of stuff that we just never really had visibility into before.
I come to this as one of the things that really excites me so much about this Zenobia Award is partially just self-interest. I want to play really good games that are about interesting historical periods. I want to see some really good historical examination, but I'm also coming to this from the position of, so I'm a Latin teacher. In case you didn't know, the field of Latin teaching is really, really white. And it takes work to try to create programs that will attract students from all backgrounds, students with all interests. And, I specifically took the job that I'm in now because I was in a program, I am now in a program that's dedicated to that. And it takes time. But the hope, right, is that we're going to have next gen Latin students who go major in classics and then become classics professors. And I'm seeing similar things on this board. So one of the things that's really difficult about putting together a board for the Zenobia Award is that right now we have a nascent supply of would-be designers with great ideas. We don't necessarily have a super deep pool of people who can be asked to contribute free labor to the Zenobia Award. Right. So where do y'all see this going in terms of, we have a board that's not diverse enough now. So how do we respond to questions about that? What do we do about it going down the line?
So I think the first thing is to recognize, the board itself is one, made of great people who have different experiences, all bring certain talents and perspectives to it. But could it be more diverse? Absolutely, right? But I think that's also, you know what I mean, a slight microcosm / reflection of the problem that we're trying to address, right? And also hopefully it's the notion that, you know what I mean, this board and this award and the whole process would evolve, right? And the notion is that as we develop new designers over the years and we get new voices, or even people that we don't know about out there in the country, right, that are in their own little bubbles doing really interesting work, right, that maybe they hear about us and then we're like, oh, come join us, right? And for those who are like, oh, you know what I mean, the board's not diverse enough, or who's going to judge? I was like, well, if you have concerns and if you're in our field, right, like, come join us, right? Like, come be a judge, go be a mentor, right? And I say this to, you know, my students all the time, right? Like, you know, it's sort of that medical school like adage, right? Learn one, teach one, right? You have learned, I've learned the benefit from so many mentors, right? And this is sort of my way of saying, hey, like, now's my turn to teach one, right? And hopefully, you know, they will do the same, right? So for those who are like, well, you know, the board should be more diverse, absolutely, right? And that's the goal, right? It's the goal one day for this to be totally, you know what I mean, packed with people who are driven and passionate and diverse from all spectrums, right? And all experiences, right? And then Harold and Volko can be sipping martinis somewhere on some nice tropical island, right? Kicking up their shoes, right? And that's the hope, right? That they're eventually the next generation will catch this, right? And eventually after that, right, it won't be necessary, right? It's like essentially we're trying to get ourselves out of the job, right? Or at least that's how I see it.
Absolutely.
That was that about the martinis or the beach?
Yes.
Same way you do. It's, you know, in a sense, insofar as we can create a safe place where people can come and learn, and even if there are miscommunications and errors and missteps, we can, you know, kind of pull together people who are working in their small isolated cubbies with their small group of friends with whom, you know, we can build a deeper network where that nascent talent is, right? And it's in people's homes, in people's basements, it's in people's, you know, game clubs and, you know, game cafes. And I mean, it's like, it's out there. It's just, it's hard to pull it. Well, if we can act like a little bit of a gravity pull, then we'll be able to find people who want to be on the board, right? People who will volunteer their time and their knowledge and can mentor, people who've actually gone through our process, right? And come out on the other side saying, wow, you know, there was something of value in this exercise. So I would like to, you know, give back to the community by, you know, by doing that. Or even if they learn something about how to do this, they can then go make their own award. Like, you know, it can metastasize, it can spread in any number of ways by the kind of experiences people have here. And so it's another thing, you have to start somewhere. And this is where we've chosen to start. There may be people who are choosing to start someplace else, and I'm like all into that too, but this is where we've chosen to start.
I think there's also a very powerful like notion of the sense, like, you know, like Christiane said, like gravity pull, but also like the designers themselves, as like the submittees and applicants, they'll meet each other, right? They'll meet each other in the process, or we will say like, oh, like I know someone that has a similar idea or has a similar perspective, or I think you should meet XYZ, right? I think those will also be those intangible benefits of this process. And hopefully you can create these notions that are across, you know, spectrums, but also, you know, borders, right? And I think that would be really amazing to see designers from Ireland and designers from like Kenya, right? You know, exchange ideas and historical, you know, perspectives, and say like, you know what if we flip this paradigm, right, that we're always told, right? And we look at it a different way, right? Or look at this whole conflict that's super interesting but I've never heard of, right?
Right.
Like I'm still waiting for a board game about like the Chinese pirate queen, Madame Ching, right?
Yes.
Like, yeah, I'm like, oh.
I wrote about her in Latin for my Latin class last year.
right? Yeah, so like stuff like that, right? Or like my students and I are doing like a pet project on the Imjin War, right? Which is a 16th century conflict between Japan invading Korea, and the Chinese were involved, right? It's like really like your cataclysmic, like World War III sort of, or regional war sort of kind of apocalyptic sort of stuff. And it has things like turtle ships, right? Like really cool stuff, right? And that's the notion, is like, oh, can we expand our historical aperture, but also our perspective, right, through these designers? And I think that's so exciting. I like when Volko sent out that email saying we had 14 applicants already, I was like, show me the abstracts. I want to know what they
know.
Right now.
As someone who's not, war certainly is in my games, but I'm not a war gamer. I'm a social historian, right? But I would love to see a game like about, it could be even a deck building game, right? This is in the back of my head in some strange way, right? Where, court poetry in the Sassanid Empire was a political weapon, right? So like, how could we build a game about poems and power? Like the potential is endless, right? Of things you could do that aren't specifically about war, but are still, about historical eras and political tools and power that, could be very, very fascinating, very exciting. And
yeah, just things that aren't about the same events, the same people, the same eras again and again and again. So I love classical history. I do. I don't need any more games about Julius Caesar just now. I mean, there's so much else that you could do. There's just this whole broad, and also, ancient Rome covered everywhere, including North Africa and the Middle East. And I would like to see a game about like Coptic Egypt instead of Pharaonic Egypt. Or just something different. I want something to excite my gamer's palate.
That's right.
I think it's also important for us to point out that there's a distinction between the board and the judges. Okay. And, a board traditionally manages process, sets rules, and plays a very, sort of a very high level role. The judges, on the other hand, is really the important place, I think, for us to ensure that there's the proper level of diversity. Mm-hmm. We want the contestants to be comfortable that their game is being seen by individuals that are sympathetic to the challenges that they face. And, I recognize that's not going to be me. And I think that what we'll do is, when we start to form the judges panel, is certainly we will pull some members from the board, right? And that's always been the intention. We've always talked about that. But there will be many judges who are not members of the board. And I think that's the real challenge ahead of us. And I think it's one that we can meet and do well at. But there's a difference between the panel and the judges.
Yeah. And, I'm very appreciative of the feedback, both the enthusiasm and the questions that we've gotten so far. What I'm really looking forward to personally is being able to put effort into making sure that our applicants have a very stellar experience with us from beginning to end. And the feedback that I want to hear the most is, do you feel supported by your mentor? Did someone reach out to you at the appropriate time? Did you feel comfortable asking questions or expressing concerns to the person who's mentoring you? Do you feel that you were set up to present your game as well as possible? Do you feel that the feedback that you received on your game was constructive, and that it would, even if your game didn't win, did you feel like you got something out of this? For me, it's the teacher in all of us, right? We're all educators. The idea, right, is to make sure that the person who's going through an experience with you has a really quality experience all the way through. And I am really looking forward to helping as much as I can with that part of the process. I'm not a game developer, but I will absolutely, be happy to, look at applications and help connect. I just, my great hope is that from this process, we're going to see designers who are newly confident, who have workable ideas that are either going somewhere right now or are going to, people who want to come back. Because the idea isn't, oh, you had a competition and you lost, now go away. Right. The idea is you had an experience, maybe you even made friends with other people
Made
who are making
relationships.
prototypes for this. And now you have forged a bond that will change the future of historical gaming because a new network got made.
I deeply agree with that. I deeply agree with that. And you know, I'm my history department's assessment director. So my job is to assess the functionality of a program. And so I very much am interested in how we can have the contestants help us assess where things are working and where things didn't do or didn't deliver what they need to have delivered, right? So what did we not help you learn that you feel like you need to know?
Mhm.
So that kind of mechanism for self-criticism so that we can then adjust, I think is really important.
Sebastian, what did you say earlier about kicking the tires?
Oh yeah. It's just the notion that, you know, I mean, this whole process is kicking the tires, right? Getting something on the table to see if it works, right? And this is as true for the applicants with their submissions as much as it is for us as the board members, right? Is that we didn't want to, we didn't have the luxury of waiting forever, right? In the sense that we wouldn't know until it hit the road and we had to go kick the tires essentially, right? And we will learn as we go. It sort of reminds me of the same nervous feeling I had when I first taught as an adjunct, right? I was like, okay, I'm gonna write the syllabus. I did all the readings, but like there are so many mistakes, right? Hopefully my boss is not watching, right? And so many things I learned on the job that you couldn't have told me in August or July before our class that set off, right? For instance, like our program has like a certain mandatory reading for grad programs, right? But I was like, well, that's not really akin to what I'm trying to do because they have to do their own research, right? So like this semester, I replaced a lot more things that I didn't think were essential articles with videos. Of like, is there a way for you to listen to this while in the car or during chores or you're in rocking your baby, right? You don't have to like sit down and read it like a 30-page article. Is there still a way for me to transmit the same knowledge to you, right? And there are other things of like, what games do I choose, right? Like, and this is also one of the things I learned the first semester was after I graded that first batch of games that my students design, I saw too much of my voice in their games, right? Right. I saw too much of the games that I love because I lent them stuff from my personal collection, right? Because we didn't have a Georgetown like gaming library at the time.
Right.
And I was like, oh no, like this is like the games were great and the students did a fantastic job, right? But for me as an educator, I was like, oh no, like this is problematic, right? In the sense that I don't want mini-me's like being like this program to be mini-me's, right? I want them to have their own voice, find their own voice in the class, right? So this year, one of the things I wanted to do was to get, and this is one of the perks of the virtual environment was I got like people like Volko and professors who do wargaming at the Command General Staff College to Zoom into my class. And when my students were doing their oral presentations, they would give their own feedback, which were different, right? And so they got feedback that I wouldn't have seen or thought of, right? Or from their own experiences. And I want to keep doing that, right? It's a notion of like, how do I get other designers to influence them and give them a wider toolkit, right? And I think that's one of the things we are also trying to do. As every applicant that goes through the process will get something out of it, but every applicant will also give us a new lesson to learn, I think. And that's the real excitement of it. And all of you will eventually be invited to my class as well to serve as guest reviewers for my students. It's really fun.
I will absolutely traumatize students other than my own.
I think one last thing that my experience as an educator is that this generation is more risk averse in a public space than maybe my generation or earlier generation, partly because of how they were taught. And I think it's important for Zenobia to be creating, and I think this is where we're going, to make a place where it's safe to take a risk, where there's no punishment for taking a risk, or the punishment is so mild as not to be even a punishment, and there's creativity and risk are like peas and carrots, or I don't know, peanut butter and jelly, or I don't know, whatever pairing makes sense. And encouraging people to take risks the same way we're doing it, right? We're taking a risk. And so we're modeling the thing like, okay, this may have problems, and so may your game design. So what? Right? What? It's not a destructive thing, right? This is that place where the error happens. That's where learning happens. That's exactly the place you want to be. If you're not in the error zone, you're not learning yet. So, I think that this is that kind of a space that we're trying to make.
I really like that way of putting it. Absolutely. Because it's true of my students too. You're right. A lot of them become distressed if they don't get something right the first time. Right. And, I am a big believer that it's not about being perfect. It's about being the person who does something.
Also, one of the things I think would be what Liz said back in the day is like, no offense to all the people who love like Civil War games, is like that's just a genre that just never appeals to me. I'm just like, I have some, and I tried, like, right, like it's just like, why do we have so many American Civil War games? Like, and I see people who are like not even Americans playing them. I'm like, do you find this fun, right? Like, and I'm like, are there other things, and even to go beyond war, right, that we should be looking at? I really like the poetry and power idea. I love court dynamic, like court sort of setting games. I think those are always fun and interesting. Are there other, eras that we can look at, right? Are there, different angles that we can look at in terms of, like, for instance, like, instead of like, one of the great critiques of like our historical gaming like community and industry is like we essentially commercialize like wars of colonialism, right? And it's a notion like we always replay those wars, right? But like, show me a game about like what happens after I gain independence, right? Like I want games of like, hey, I have just liberated, whether you're Australia or Zimbabwe, right? Show me a game of like, okay, now we want independence. Now how do we build our country, right? I think that would be a really interesting game, or like you have different priorities, different factions, different visions for your country, right? Or stuff like that, or like just flip the script, right? Be bold and do things, right? And like whether it be a war or I love the the notion of like Hollandspiel has a game about women's rights and women's suffrage, right? Fourth Circle is coming out one with similar things, right? Are there other social issues that we can look at through the lens of gaming, right? That make people understand better, or just as a medium for us to even explore a really wicked, difficult challenge, right? And I think that's a really appealing portion, because I think all gamers are sort of nerds, right? For hard problems, right? We love the wicked hard problems. And I think that's a really interesting way. And I'm so curious what Volko got in his inbox. I'm just like, I want to see, right? I think a lot of us share the same joy with that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm dying to see what we got submitted already.
Right. I'm like, oh, right.
Like, is Christmas about to come early? Perhaps.
No better time for COVID is getting like a whole bunch of like applications, like, oh, I can sit here with this and think and imagine, right? And peek into somebody else's head. Yeah. Looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Me too. So we're going to wrap up soon, but I'm honestly really looking forward to working with y'all. I'm looking so forward to this project. And thank you all for coming on and spending some time talking about this together.
Thanks for calling us together, Liz. It's a cool opportunity.
Any last thoughts before I let you go?
We need to play games together, y'all.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
We need to get together. We need to have a retreat.
Yes, board retreat.
Right?
I think that's all boards really do, right?
Yeah, retreat.
Yeah, we could call it a retreat. I love it. Also, can one of y'all teach me how to use Vassal?
Yes. We have
so dirty secret is that, like, I know, a certain generation, no offense, Harold, right? Of like gamers love Vassal, right? And I try using it with my students, and my students are like, WTF, what is this, right? What is this like old school, like, play by email sort of function? And so like they just don't accept it, right? And I'm like, okay, all right. So we go to in tabletop simulator or something they're more akin to, because they're like, okay, I'm buying into this, right? but like Steam is one of the things they really are smart on, right?
Yeah. That's right.
So I cater to them, right? But yes, I understand. Like everyone loves Vassal, but admittedly, also like as someone who like lives off a Mac, right? Like I'm just like, right? But I do have a game PC, but you know what I mean? But yes, I understand. I understand that.
But see, this is why we need new voices who
Yeah.
will use other more palatable systems. So to wrap this up, to everybody out there, if you are in a marginalized group and you have a game idea, please send it to us. We really want to see your game. We want to take your concept and help you make it as amazing as it can be. If you want to help us, we can always use some judges. If you're a game developer and you want to help develop a game, we will happily take your free gift of time to do some mentorship. And whoever you are, follow us along the path, because I know interesting stuff is going to come out of this award.
What's our website?
It is ZenobiaAward.org. I'll put a caption. Good night, everybody.
Good night.